What is the difference between community and separate property in inheritance? Imagine you're piecing together a family puzzle, and each piece tells a different story about ownership and inheritance. That's what makes understanding community and separate property so important. When it comes to estate law and inheritance, knowing how assets are classified can change who gets what and how assets are divided. So, let's break down what makes these two types of property different and why it matters in estate planning and inheritance laws. Community property is all about assets and income acquired during a marriage while living in a community property state. This includes earnings from work, property bought with marital funds, and assets gained during the marriage. It doesn't matter whose name is on the title, both spouses own it equally. When one spouse passes away, community property usually goes directly to the surviving spouse or is divided equally if there are heirs involved. This rule helps keep things simple and fair for spouses during estate distribution. Separate property, on the other hand, includes assets owned before marriage or acquired during marriage through gifts, inheritance, or a will. For example, if you inherit money or a house from a relative, that's generally considered your separate property. The key is that it remains your own if you keep it separate and don't mix it with community assets. This means that if you inherit a property, it stays yours alone unless you put it into a joint account or use it to buy something jointly owned. When you die without a will, your separate property is distributed according to state laws, often to your children or other heirs, not necessarily to your spouse. A common issue happens when separate property, like inheritance money, gets mixed with community property. If you deposit inheritance funds into a joint bank account or use it to improve a shared home, it can lose its separate status. This process is called commingling, and it can make inheritance assets part of the community property pool. That's why keeping inheritance funds in separate accounts and not mixing them with joint assets is so important. In estate planning, understanding these differences helps protect inherited assets from being divided or lost. Wills and trusts often specify how separate property should be handled to avoid accidental loss of ownership rights. Proper documentation and clear financial management are essential to keep inheritance assets separate and ensure they go to the right heirs. In cases where someone dies without a will, known as intestate succession, separate property is distributed based on state laws. Usually, it goes to the decedent's children, parents, or other relatives. Community property, however, typically passes directly to the surviving spouse unless there are other instructions or legal arrangements. To sum up, community property is all assets acquired during marriage and owned equally by both spouses, while separate property includes assets owned before marriage or received through inheritance or gifts. Inheritance is usually considered separate property, but it must be kept separate to avoid becoming community property through commingling. Keeping detailed records and separate accounts helps protect inheritance assets and ensures they are distributed according to your wishes. Understanding these rules is key to making smart estate plans and protecting your loved ones' future.